Hey, welcome back. Thanks for watching my video. Today we're going to look at the Chapter 8 review. We're officially done with all the lessons in Chapter 8, all the stuff I wanted to cover in it. And I have found 23, I think, review questions on the Big Ideas Math site that I am ready to assign to you. But I just want to give you a quick refresher on what the questions are going to look like. So I have the questions kind of queued up over here on my computer off camera, and I just want to show you what you're going to have to do. So for the first four, questions 1 through 4, it's going to give you an equation that looks something like this, right? Remember this from the very first video from this chapter? It's just going to be y equals something times x squared, and that's going to give you multiple choice options. You're going to have to match up the graph to the correct formula here, and then it's also going to ask you some questions down below. So, for example, it might look like this. I'm just going to make these up. I don't even know if these are the real questions or not. Here are the four choices, right? It could be positive with a number greater than 1 for the letter A. You could have a positive with a number that's less than 1. You could have a negative that's more than 1 place away from 0, or you could have a negative fraction. Right? They're all going to look like this. And so you should, I hope, be able to narrow it down to like a 50-50 guess just by looking at the four graphs, right? Because the letter A, remember, tells you a lot of stuff about the graph. Right here, the letter A is positive, so I know it's going to open up. The letter A is also bigger than 1, so I know this is going to be pretty narrow, right? It's going to be pretty close together. And so I want to pick one of the two that kind of looks like this, right? But if you've got two of them that are both kind of narrow, how do you know which one to pick? So if you've got two of them that are both opening up and they're both kind of narrow, how do I know which one to go with? Well, I would maybe make a little X and Y table for myself, and then pick a number that would be easy to plug in for the letter X, like maybe pick the number 2, because I think a lot of these at the beginning, they count by 2 on the X-axis whenever they have their graph. So if I put 2 up here, it's going to be 3 times 2 squared, and then you could work that out. That would be 12. And if you wanted to pick another number like 4, just to double check, 3 times 4 squared, that would be 48. And then you can look and see out of the graphs that you're picking between which one looks like the point 212 and 448 are actually on the line. And then just pick that one. Whoa. So then pick the right graph, but then don't move on, because down below it's going to ask you some just kind of questions where you have to drag the right word in to fill the blank. It's going to say like the graph of this graph is a vertical stretch. Remember, when the letter A is bigger than 1, it's a vertical stretch. This is a vertical stretch by a factor of whatever this number is. And in this case, the number is 3. So this would be a vertical stretch by a factor of 3. Okay. If it's one that's like my second one, let me switch colors here. This is going to be still positive, so I know it's still going to open up, but now it's a number less than 1, right? See how my letter A is 1/2. So now this is going to be open pretty wide. This is not going to look like these. This is going to be more wide open. But what happens if you get two of them? They're both kind of wide open, and you don't know which one. They're both actually going to, all of these are going to have, like, this would be the origin. They're all going to have their vertex on the origin. But if you have two of them that are both on the origin and they're both kind of wide, right? How do you know which one to pick? Because one of those is just a little bit wider than the other. Well, do what I just did on the last one, right? Make a little table. Pick a number that would be easy. I'm going to recommend even numbers. And then just plug it in up here. 2 squared is 4, so that would be 1/2 times 4. Half of 4 is 2. If I wanted to try again, and I put 4 up there, 4 squared is 16. So I would do 1/2 of 16. Half of 16 is 8. And so then I'm just going to look and see which one of these graphs looks like it has the point 22 and the point 48 on the actual line, and then that's the one I'm going to pick from. Now, a key thing to remember, after you pick your right graph, you're going to go down below. Whenever this letter A is in between 0 and 1, it's not called a vertical stretch. This is called a vertical shrink, right? That's the difference. You call it a shrink when it's in between 0 and 1, and then it's still by a factor of, but this is going to be a factor of 1/2, not the one that we used in the last one. Factor of 1/2 because I had 1/2 right there. Okay, so that'll be the first two. 3 and 4 might be negatives. When the letter A is negative, you know it's going to open down. Now, -4 is going to be very narrow. So this is going to be extremely narrow. And then how do you pick between two of them that are both extremely narrow? Do what I just did on the last one, make an X and Y table. I'm not going to do that on this one. You can do that. Plug the number in, work it out. And then this is going to still be a vertical stretch, right? Anytime this letter A is more than one place away from 0, right? It has an absolute value bigger than 1. This is going to be a vertical stretch. It's going to be a vertical stretch. It's going to be by a factor of 4, not negative 4, by a factor of 4. The negative is where you call it a, we flipped it, right, because it's pointing down. It's also called a reflection. So these negatives have 3 answers. Reflection over the x-axis, and I'm out of room. But I'm just going to squeeze it in. So these that have a negative at the beginning, they're going to be vertical, in this case a stretch, because this number was bigger than 1, or had an absolute value bigger than 1, by a factor of 4, and then the negative tells you it's a reflection, right? Anytime it has a negative, you have to put reflection over the x-axis. Okay, and then the last one, my green marker worked yesterday. Let's see if it works again today. Oh, kind of. Oh, there we go. It's starting to warm up a little bit. This is still negative. The fact that it's negative means it opens down. It means it's also going to be a reflection like this one was. This is negative 2/3. 2/3 is a fraction between 0 and 1, so this one's going to be pretty wide. And then just use your little x and y chart to figure out which, if there's 2 of them that are both kind of wide, which one is right. This is not a vertical stretch. This is a vertical shrink. This one's called a shrink because the reason it's a shrink is because this number, the letter A, is in between 0 and 1 because it's wide instead of narrow. This is by a factor of 2/3, right? By a factor of 2/3. And then this one is also, I'm just going to highlight it right here, it's also a reflection over the y-axis. Anytime you have a negative at the beginning, it's going to be a reflection. Okay, so that should get you number 1 through 4. Number 5 is kind of easy. It just gives you an example, and you have to say what the axis of symmetry is. You have to say what the vertex is. You have to say the domain and range. It's not too bad. The next couple, let me erase this. No, you know what? I have plenty of boards. Let me just grab another one here instead of wasting time erasing. Okay, so then in the next group, questions, it looks like 6, 7, 8, 9... 6, 7, 8 through 9, questions 6 through 9, it's going to give you a little bit of a different twist on it. It's going to be almost the same as the last one, but now we're going to put a number at the end, right? So I'm just going to do a couple examples. You might have one that looks like this, and then you might have one that looks like this. I'll do a negative one just to show you. And I'll even do this one as a fraction. I don't know. I'm just going to make that up. And so it's going to do the same thing. It's going to ask you to multiple choice, pick the right one, and then it's going to say, what's the domain, what's the range, right? Easy. On all of these, the domain is going to be all real numbers, but the range is going to be a little bit more complicated. So how can you look at this to figure out what graph to pick for the multiple choice? Because there's going to be 4 multiple choice graphs, and you have to pick the right one. Once again, look at the letter A and look at the letter C. That's going to give you some information. When this... the letter A, right? Here's your letter A on here. Here's your letter A on this one. When the letter A is positive, so if this is my question, I know this one is going to be one that opens up. It's going to open up, and then this letter C is going to be the y-intercept. So right here, the letter C, so I know this has a y-intercept of 0, -3. And so I'm going to be looking for a graph that opens up. I'm going to be looking for a graph that has a y-intercept of 0, -3, right? A graph that touches, that starts right here, 3 places below the origin, and it's obviously going to have to open up. The fact that this is 2 means it's kind of narrow, so it's going to be kind of like this. If I don't know if there's 2 of them, like maybe they are going to be tricky and give you 2 graphs that have the right y-intercept, and they're both kind of narrow. How do you know which one is the correct one? Like if you have another one over here that looks almost similar, right? It also has the right y-intercept, but it might just be a little bit wider or a little bit more narrow, and you can't tell which one is right just by looking at it. Well, once again, anytime you're stuck, make one of these little handy-dandy X and Y tables. Pick a number that's easy, like maybe you notice, hey, it looks like way up here it has the point 2 something on there, right? Say, okay, I'm going to put 2 in there and work it out, right? So you do 2 squared, that's 4. So you're going to have 2 times 4 minus 3. 2 times 4 is 8, 8 minus 3 is 5. So I'm going to just pick a point that looks like it's on the graph, work it out, and see if it actually, see what you get, and then just see which graph has that point on there, 2, 5, right? And so that might help you pick when you have 2 of them to choose between. All of them in our chapter are going to have a domain of all real numbers. For the domain, you're always going to pick all real numbers. The range on this one, remember the range is how much of the y-axis does this graph use. This graph is everything up here right? The low point is -3. Even on this one, if this was the right answer, it still has a low point of -3, and then everything is going up. So on this one, the range is y greater than or equal to, because we're above, greater than or equal to -3, right? So that'll be a multiple choice one you can fill in when you're done with that one. Same thing over here. Whenever they add in the y-intercept number, so I know this is going to open down, because right here, that tells me it opens down, the fact that it's negative. The fact that the letter A is a fraction less than 1, or in between 0 and 1, tells me this one is kind of wide. And then it has a y-intercept right here. The letter C is my y-intercept. My y-intercept is 0, 4. So I'm looking for a graph that has a vertex, right here, of 0, 4. And I'm looking for a graph that opens down, something that opens, and this is kind of wide. It opens down, and it's kind of wide. So something like this, right? And if there's two of them you're trying to pick between, there's two of them that have the right y-intercept and two of them that are both opening down, and they're both kind of wide, and you can't pick between the two just by looking at it. Make yourself a little table. Pick a number that looks like it's on, would be an easy number to use, like maybe you pick the number, I don't know, 3. Plug it in and work it out, right? Plug it in here. 3 squared is 9. -1/3 times 9 times 9, and then plus 4, right? -1/3 times 9 would be -3. -3 plus 4 would be 1. And look for the one that has the point 31 on it, right? This one is still going to be, even though it has the parabola opening down, it still has a domain of all real numbers. You're always going to pick all real numbers for the domain. And then this one is going to have a range. It's going to have here, and it goes down, right? This graph has a definite high point and then goes below it. So the range on this one is going to be y less than or equal to 4, because it's below 4. At the point 4 and below is where this graph is. All right, so that should get you all the way to number 11. 11 and 12. And 13 are all kind of similar. Maybe even 14. Let me scroll down real fast. 11, 12, 13. Nope. Number 11 through 13. 11 through 13 are going to be like this. Now we're going to have this in the middle. We're going to have this piece in the middle like this, right? So the question might be, y equals, I'm just going to make one up here, 2x squared minus 3x plus, I don't know, 9, something like that. And it's going to give you 4 graphs. You're going to have to pick the right graph, and you're going to have to then down below describe what it is. So, okay, I'm sorry about that. I just had to double check. So this one, I can't just look at it. I know that my letter A is positive, so I know this thing opens up. I know that it's kind of narrow, but now I don't know like the vertex or the y-axis. Remember how we did this? When you have this and this and this, when we have all 3 terms, remember we had something called the axis of symmetry, right? The axis of symmetry had this formula, x equals -b over 2a, right? We had this. And you know how this is the a, this is the b, this is the c, right? And so let's actually work out the axis of symmetry. So I'm going to do -b, -3. And if you remember, negative is the same thing as positive. I'll change that in a minute. 2 times a, 2 times 2. And so negative is the same thing as positive. I would have 3 divided by, or 3 over 2 times 2. So on this one, my axis of symmetry is going to be right here at x equals 3/4. And so I know that my graph is going to be like right here where 3/4 would be. My graph is going to be like, the axis of symmetry is going to be right there. And then how do you find the vertex? How do I find the actual point? You take 3/4, which I shouldn't have done this one because it's a fraction. You take 3/4 and you plug it in for x. You plug it in for x and you work it out. And then that's going to tell you the actual point where the vertex is. So maybe let's just for fun, let's act like this wasn't 3/4, because usually it's not going to be a fraction. Let's act like it was actually 2, just for my benefit. If it was actually 2, and then you would plug it in, you take the number 2, you plug it in up here, you plug it in right there, and you would say 2 times 2 squared is 4. So 2 times 4 minus 3 times 2 plus 9. And that would be 8 minus 6 plus 9. Sorry about that. You can't see it. Back it up. So that's going to be 2 plus 9. 2 plus 9 equals 11. And so if your x on this one was 2 and your y is 11, you're going to look for the one that has the point 2, 11 on there. And then that should give you the right one. Okay. So that's what you're going to need on those. You're going to have to do the axis of symmetry, get your answer, which mine was a fraction, so I just magically changed it so it wasn't a fraction. Get your answer and then plug it in for x, and that's going to tell you the vertex, 2, 11. And then you can tell, like, if this one opened up and it was supposed to be kind of narrow, I'm going to look for the one that has 2, 11 that opens up and is kind of narrow, right? Or if it was the real answer, which I really had was 3/4, I would look for the one that actually had the real answer on that one. So, whoa. That should be 11, 12, and 13. Number 13 is actually a word problem. It says, hey, a pumpkin was fired in the air out of a cannon. Here's the formula for that models the graph or the height of the pumpkin after it was shot up into the air, right? Something like this. I don't know. Then there's always some number at the end. It doesn't really matter. And it's going to ask you, hey, how high did the pumpkin get? Or how long did it take the pumpkin to reach its maximum height? That is a clue to do this, right? Do the axis of symmetry just like we did with A, B, and C, right? Do the negative B over 2A, right? Negative 88 over 2 times negative 16. So you'll get that answer. That answer will tell you how long it took this pumpkin to reach its highest point when you launch it out of the cannon. And then let's just say, for example, you get your answer is 3. I don't know if that's actually the answer on this. I'm just going to act like it was. And then if you got your answer for 3, it takes 3 seconds for this pumpkin to reach its highest point, and then it asks you how high is it when it makes it to its highest point. Then you take 3 and plug it in, just like we did on the last one. Take 3 and plug it in for the letter T in both of these spots, and then just work it out. Right? So you do negative 16 times 3 squared, which is 9. You do 88 times 3. And then you do plus whatever the number is out there. You'd work it out, and that would tell you how high it is off the ground when it actually gets to its tallest height. So that's going to be number 13. Okay. Let me scroll my calculator. I can't talk computer down. Okay. So the next few, 14, 15, 16, 14, 15, 16, and even 17. They're going to give you some that are in the other format. They're going to give you some that may look like this, right? Remember this guy? They're going to give you something that look like this. Like here's, for example, this is actually number 15. I'm just going to write down the real thing. This is going to be like number 15 through, I think it's 18. I could be wrong. Let me scroll down. 17 for sure. It's just 17. 15 through 17. They're going to give you something that looks like this. Like here's number 15. 15 looks like this. It says f of x instead of the letter y. Don't let that bother you. The a is 1/2. It says this. Right, and then it's going to ask you to pick the right graph. They have 4 graphs to choose. And then it's going to ask you all these other kind of terminology words at the end. Remember how these work. When it's written in this type of format, this is called Vertex Form, right? Because the H and the K are the vertex. Remember what we're looking at. When the letter A, this is the letter A right here, I know this opens up because the letter A is positive. I know it's kind of wide because this is right here. My letter A is less than 1. It's a fraction. But then remember, this in the parentheses, it tells you where your vertex is, and it's always the opposite of the way that it looks. -1 is actually 1 to the right, right? So I'm going to go 1 to the right over here. And then this number at the end is always the amount up or down, and it's not going to tease you. It's always going to be the way that it looks. So if it's +1, so this means to go up 1. This -1 actually means 1 to the right, instead of 1 to the left. So I'm going to go 1 to the right and up 1 right here. Hopefully there's only one of the 4 choices that has this as its vertex. And then you can pick it. This is going to be kind of wide, something like this. If for some reason they gave you 2 of them that both have a vertex of 1, 1, and they're both kind of wide, you could pick a number that and plug it in for x and work it out, right? You could maybe pick the number 4 and like do a little x and y table and pick the number 4, plug it in, work it out just like we did. Or pick the number 2, pick the number 1. Doesn't really matter which number you pick. Okay, how would I describe this one? I would describe this as a, let's see, it's a translation, right? It's a horizontal translation. Well, you know what? Let me actually do the first part. The fact that you have 1/2, this tells you that it is a vertical, it's a vertical shrink, right? Because it's when it's less than 1, we say shrink by a factor of 1/2. I would also say it's a translation 1 unit to the right, and in this case 1 unit up. You could call that a horizontal translation if you wanted, but they don't make you pick those. They just make you pick right or left or up or down. Okay, so that'll get you those. Let me do a couple of the last ones, and then I'm probably about out of time here. I'm already over 20 minutes. Let me go to the next group. Number, let's see. Oh, no, number 17 is actually different. 17, 18, 17 and 18. These are going to be in the other format. These are going to be in the, these are going to be in the intercept form instead of the vertex form. All right, this is called intercept form. So this one's going to look a little bit different. Intercept form is where you don't have something squared, you just have 2 parentheses, right? And so this one might look something like, I don't know, something like this. And it's going to give you 4 graphs. You're going to have to pick the right one. Remember, these numbers tell you exactly what you need to know. The fact that the letter A right here is positive, this tells me that it opens up. The fact that this is less than 1, it's a fraction, tells me that this is pretty wide. And then these 2 numbers, remember these, the P and the Q, these are the x-intercepts, or these are the zeros. So -2 actually means 2 to the right, and +3 actually means 3 to the left. You always do the opposite in these parentheses. And so I'm going to be looking for a graph that opens up. I'm going to be looking for a graph that touches the y-axis right here, 2 to the right, has an x-intercept. I'm going to be looking for one that has an x-intercept 3 to the left. So it opens up. So maybe it looks something like this, right? And you should be able to pick the right one based on those characteristics. If you can't, if there's 2 of them that both have the same, they both have the correct intercept, they both have the correct points here and here, and they both open up, and you can't pick which one because they're both kind of wide, just pick a number that looks like it's on the line, plug it in, and then just see which one is right. Okay, that's going to be intercept form. That's going to give you number 20, number 17 and 18, number 19, number 20, number 21, number 22, are going to be similar. They're just going to be a little bit different, right? So from like 21, and I think this might actually be the last ones. Let me actually scroll down here. 21 to, definitely to 22. 19 to 22. Okay, from number 19 to 22, it's going to be kind of like the ones that we just did, except they're not going to be already simplified for you, right? For example, it might look like this, and they might have, I'm just going to make this up, right? It's going to look like this. It's actually, well, I'm just going to stop. It's actually in the first format we looked at way back at the beginning of the video, but they want you to do this with the intercept form, right? It's not going to be factored yet, right? These are not factored. So can you actually factor these, right? Can we look here and say, hey, do I know 2 numbers that multiply together to equal -15? I'm like, sure I do. I know it's negative 15 and 1, negative 5 times 3, negative 3 times 5, negative 1 times 15. Those are my 4 choices. And out of those 4 choices, which one of the 4 choices adds up, has the 2 numbers that I picked add up to positive 2? So you look at them here. Okay, which one of these would add up to positive 2? That would not. That would equal negative 14, so it's not that. Negative 5 plus 3, that would equal negative 2, so it's not that one. I think it's this one right here, right? Negative 3 plus 5. And so you're going to have to actually, negative 3, positive 5, you're going to have to actually simplify it first, right? Once you get it simplified, now you know some things about this, right? Using the last stuff that we just talked about, I know my letter A is 1, so I know it opens up. This is kind of a normal one, right? It's not really wide or narrow. I know it has a negative 3 and a plus 5 right here. Remember what this tells you. Negative 3 is actually 3 to the right, is an x-intercept, right? So I'm going to be looking for something that has a, whoa, that's not a very straight line. I'm looking for something that has an x-intercept 3 to the right. Right here, plus 5 actually means 5 to the left, because it's always the opposite of the way that it looks. So it opens up. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like this, right? And there you go. The domain and the range should be pretty obvious. The domain is always going to be all real numbers. The range is going to be whatever this point is. I just freehanded it. But you would count down to wherever this point is, then it would be y greater than or equal to whatever this number is, negative, who knows. Okay, if it's not one that you can just do in your head, like they might give you one like this. They might give you one like this. I'm just going to make something up here. Something like that. All right, and you might have to take out the GCF first, right? You might have to say, oh, wait a second, I can divide all these numbers by 2. So if you divide them all by 2, then you have this. And then you're like, oh, wait a second, now I can break this down. Do I know 2 numbers that multiply together to equal 4, that add up to equal positive 4? You're like, wait a second, yeah, I do. That's 2 and 2, right? And so now I'm looking for a graph that would have, it would be opening up, it would be kind of narrow, it would have an x-intercept of negative 2, right? This one would have an x-intercept of negative 2. Actually, this one is also negative 2, so that means it's going to be right on the line. It's going to be something like this, right? So if they give you one that's not simplified yet, you have to simplify it yourself, just like I did right there, right? Let me see, last one, the grand finale, number 23. And then I promise I'm done. Number 23 is going to ask you, this is the last question, it's going to say write a quadratic function in standard form whose graph passes through these points. And we just did this one the other day. And I'm just going to make this up. This is actually not going to be the real question. Right? So they're going to say, hey, the graph goes through 3, 0 and negative 2, 0. You need to write the equation. So what you have to do is remember how these look. You're going to have to say, okay, on my graph, 3, 0, it's like right here. Negative 2, 0 is right there. I know those are my x-intercepts. So how do I find the axis of symmetry? It's always the midpoint, right? It's always what's halfway in between. What's halfway in between 3 and negative 2? Well, you could do 3 plus negative 2 and divide it by 2. And of course, I picked one that's going to be a fraction off the top of my head. That's going to be 1 over 2. That's going to be 1/2. So I know my graph goes through like right here at 1/2. My axis of symmetry is going to be 1/2. And so anyway, you're going to take your 2 points. You know it's got to look something like this, right? You know it's got to be y equals 3 to the right is actually minus 3, right? 2 to the left is actually plus 2. Whoa, I got to put the x in there. And I think that might actually be it. I actually don't think I needed to do this. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I think I actually did it right the first time. And so now this isn't in standard form. Remember then we had to do FOIL, or we had to do the distributive property, x times x, x squared, x times 2, plus 2x. And then I go up here, negative 3 times x, negative 3 times 2. And then you just kind of simplify this out. and you get your final answer of x squared, and then remember these two in the middle are usually combinable, minus 1x, and then minus 6. I believe that is right. Let me do a quick double check here and make sure I did it right. Yeah, I think I did that right. So scroll that back where you can see it. Okay, that's going to be number 23. I'm at 30 minutes, so I really need to stop. Please use this video if you need it to help you on any questions. If not, hopefully you can do them well without my help. And then tomorrow I'll probably give you a practice test, and then we may try the actual Chapter 8 test later on this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.